Hi there, it's Gabrielle Nicolay from SpeechKids and Raising Orchid Kids, where we teach little kids to talk and help parents understand their kids. And today I am speaking with Stephanie Frumkin. Stephanie, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Gabrielle. I'm very excited to be here. I'm watching your podcast and I'm excited to be a participant here. So thank you.
I'm really happy we could make this work. Stephanie is an educational consultant. And I want you to just kind of sketch out what that is, because before we hit record, you were saying, I'm not a school placement specialist, which is a different sort of flavor of this. So can you kind of lay out the terms a little bit for us?
Sure. I mean, educational consulting, there's people call themselves educational consultants and they do lots of things, which is completely fine, but I'll just define it for myself, which I consider really consulting with parents and helping guide them toward the best school fit for them. What makes sense for their individual child's needs and what makes sense for the whole family. So I'm holistic in that sense.
Which I love, as we are over here too. I always tell parents, in a perfect world, here's what we would do. But in a world where people have schedules and finances and other siblings, we might do this.
Right. Well, yeah, I definitely look at the whole picture and trying to help guide parents toward what, as I said, what makes the most sense for their child, how their child can thrive, and getting them in the right placement. And as we were talking earlier, I have a broad background in education. I've been in education for my whole career. I don't want to say how many years, but a lot of years in the field of education. And a lot of experiences. So I'm able to provide multiple options to parents, which I think is a little more unique. So as you mentioned, the school placement. So I do school placements, and I'm very involved in actively looking at different types of schools. Actually, it's one of my favorite things before the pandemic, especially. One of my favorite things to do is visit schools and just see the different models. Like I said, I'm an educator. So seeing the different models of schools to me is highlight, but
so
looking forward to that.
Pause there for a second, because I'm not many parents and those who are watching this trend with younger kids, they probably didn't understand what you meant when you said there are different models. Don't all schools educate kids pretty much the same way?
No.
So give us a for instance for how that plays out.
Which is it's been very interesting to me, because I did start out in traditional education. I mean, I have my bachelor's in elementary education, and I taught elementary school. I taught ESOL in public school. So I do have a very more traditional background, but based on my personal experiences, I branched out to see what kind of models there are. So yes, I would say most public schools are traditional in that sense. Although I will say, for example, in DC, there's many charter schools, so they have different models. So even within the public school system, there are some different models. But I'd say when you think of public school, it is really a lot more teacher centered, not as you think most people have gone through the whole
I stand here talking and you, the student, will listen. Right. That's traditional.
A lot of that. Yeah. Or sometimes there's project work or whatever, group work, but yeah, right. A more traditional education that most Americans think of. But outside of that, there's just a huge world of different possibilities. And as I said, I love visiting schools to just see what's out there, because people are doing things just so differently. I can think of one school, it's so unique. I was I've got to see this school, because they do this, people are going to know what I'm talking about, but I'm not going to name any names here, but there's a school in the area, and it's really blossoming, that they do a one-on-one model. But then they have time where students come together and do social activities, and they do homework together. So that's this really unique model. So it's one example. And then they have these progressive schools that just have there's just so many. There's a democratic schools. There's
what does that mean? A democratic school?
Oh, a democratic. We don't really have. I don't know that we have so many in this area, but which I'm kind of really focused on the DC metro area. But I think that kids get more. They get a lot of input into their education, and they work together to determine rules and how they want to run things. And it's really, it's cool. It's a cool model.
So there are parents watching this who are going to be like, what? Like, you let the children run the school? That sounds completely horrible. And that's fine, because on the flip side is a very, you know, like there are, again, these more traditional schools, but that's interesting that you kind of mentioned both of those, because I feel like and there's various ranges in the middle of that. And you alluded to like project-based learning, more experiential, where you go, right, and you're doing more field trips where you're synthesizing more information rather than and experiencing it for yourself rather than listening to the teacher talk about it.
Right. The hands-on learning. There's schools that have like lots of outdoor focus, and they're outdoors a lot. They have large campuses where they can, some of them have horseback riding, or just there's a myriad of options. Montessori.
And for most kids, public school is number one, free, number two, local, number three, perfectly fine.
Right.
And then, but the kids that you deal with and the kids that I deal with are these orchid kids, right? They're a little bit different. They need things to be the way that they need them, in whatever way that is. And so, these other school options, particularly when kids get to be, well, you know what, I wanted to ask you this. How old are the kids that come to you? Do you have a lot of pre-K rising kindergartners, or?
Yeah, so I do have a number of rising kindergartners, because that's I was going through like thinking, you know, before we talked, I was thinking, oh, like who are my favorite clients I've worked with, right? And I was just thinking through it, and I was really noticing that there was a pattern that was the transition times. That there was, I don't know that I put that together until I had this meeting, but so entering kindergarten is a time, entering entering middle school, then entering high school. I have a lot of clients that at those different points. I mean, and also I do work with students, you know, I work with, you know, basically pre-K, like going into kindergarten through 12. And I do work with a lot of, I get these emergency cases and crisis situations, which actually I really, really enjoy. We could talk about that as well. But because like you said, there's these orchid kids who these are students I work with are bright students with learning differences, and that can mean a lot of different things. There's a lot. So anyway, these transition points are a time when a lot of people seek my help, or else they're just going through something.
And that's,
time.
This is interesting, because this happens with orchids, right? And on the speech therapy side of things, I tell parents this all the time. There are kids that we will discharge from speech therapy, and I say, bye-bye, we'll never see you again. But sometimes we're saying, you know what? We're going to take a year off. We're going to see what takes. And when the environment changes and the demands get bumped up past a certain level, then we're going to check in again, because school is cumulative, right? Like life is cumulative. And so there are these inflection points where, besides these sort of traditional time-based transitions, there are also these educational inflection points where, you know, third grade is a big one, where we stop learning how to read and we start reading to learn. That's a moment where a lot of kids struggle, or some kids struggle, right? And so, and then there's another one sort of later middle school, right? When they start having to organize their work more on their own, and like, then you get all the executive functioning stuff coming in, right? And then maybe, it's funny, actually, as I'm talking about it, I'm realizing it's kind of in between those traditional time-based referral things, right? Because it's like third grade, eighth grade, and then 10th, 11th grade. If we've got sort of, you know, some latent mental health or some stress-based kinds of things, right? And so they're the orchids, they might come back into therapy. They might stop functioning well at their current school placement. And I suspect that's when parents are coming to you and being like, this isn't working anymore.
Interesting. That's very, thank you for talking about your experience with the speech and how you're seeing these times. And I actually hadn't really thought about when exactly they were seeking my help, but it could be very much like you saying. That makes a lot of sense. I agree with that when you're saying that.
I'd be super curious because actually it just came to me
Yeah.
right now. It's like, wait, there are these moments when, again, the workload has increased so much that they're starting to drown, even though they've
Right,
been
right,
fine
right, right.
until then, right?
Right, right. And then
Um,
we could talk about the whole pandemic piece, which is a lot of, I got a, I'm sure everyone's, in the, for any professional working with kids with learning differences, pandemic, post-pandemic is like really, really busy because, kids, a lot of what I saw is that kids who were hanging on by a thread at school, but their parents didn't actually necessarily know that. They sat with them during the virtual learning, and they were like, they saw how weak their executive functioning skills were. They saw their child struggling, and they're like, wow, like my child actually has a lot of challenges I wasn't even aware of. And a lot of them sought my help during that time.
And so, okay, so give us a for instance, like I'm pick one, like I'm a rising kindergartner or I'm a whatever middle schooler who's struggling, and I'm coming to you. What are parents typically saying to you, and how do you structure that first conversation?
Well, I would say I basically have sort of two types of clients. I have clients who are coming at the more traditional, time periods. Like we said, like I do get a lot of pre-K kids who are and these are parents that they're aware their kids are a little different. They probably have had a lot of them have already had testing, and they've probably seen you or the different therapists and psychologists, and they're aware that their child needs something different. So I will have those students, and then we'll kind of go through the whole. I mean, as I said, I don't just do school placement, but that could be like, those entering points, or if I also help parents with homeschooling, help them get set up with homeschooling, or I also help them with their IEPs and 504s. So those are like I will help them at those transition points, and they come to me, and it's a little bit of a longer process. Then I have other families that are just, as I said, like they come to me when there's a crisis point, and things are not going well. And honestly, that could happen anytime, anytime during the year. So sometimes in the summer, actually, surprisingly, I'm busy in the summer because parents are like, they're like, yikes, like, what do I do? School, that wasn't really good last year. And now I'm just like kind of very nervous about the next year. So summer, and then I do work, like I said, like this crisis management, but like crisis school placement, like school decision. So I work in like an intensive block with them and to help them get set up for the next step.
Is that where they're changing schools, or they're trying to rearrange things at their current school, or maybe both, or either?
So I do work with a lot who are changing placements, or there are a lot. So a lot of times they don't know what they need, and that's actually my specialty area is helping them find clarity. So they'd just be like, "This isn't working. I think I might want to." They're in private school, but private school doesn't have their private school doesn't have a lot of support. So I'm thinking I need to change to a public school perhaps, or maybe a different private school, or they're in public school and they're saying, oh, they're not following the IEP, or 504 plan. And sometimes I'll just help them take a look at what they have, and I'll help them work on it and see if we can get that sorted out. And if not, then we'll look at private school placements. So, or even homeschooling. Some parents are very open to different models. It's interesting. I've been helping parents with homeschooling for a long time before the pandemic, and then homeschooling suddenly became very popular, which has been interesting.
Yeah. Super interesting. There was a question I was going to ask you and it flew out of my head. Oh, I know. How much do you ever meet the child, and how much are you involving the child in your particular process?
So I like to meet the child. I always like to meet the child if possible. I've been working on Zoom for a while now, and normally I would just meet. Just depends how old they are. I really, if I always like to just meet them because I can hear from the parents, everything. I can talk to the therapist. I can talk, read the report. But who is this child? And you can glean a lot from meeting someone, obviously. So I try, if even just a minute, 5 minutes, usually, I mean, I used to be an elementary teacher, so I like little kids and I enjoy them. So
You don't have to tell me.
what?
I love little kids.
You
Give me
love the little ones,
two-year-olds.
right?
Oh, yeah,
My favorite grade was always second grade. So give me a good second grade or second, third grade.
And I'm like, too old.
I'm not too old. Okay. Well, I'm not so into the teenagers. I can help the parents of the teenagers. I don't have to work with the teenagers. I have 2 teenagers of my own, so I'm like,
right.
not so into that age. We all have our specialty, right?
Yeah, and good thing.
But I work with parents really, so but I'm just saying, like, I find it really easy to meet the kids, especially the kids that I enjoy. I was working with a family recently, and the little girl, she's very artistic, and she was showing me all her artwork, and so I got to see her personality, and so just trying to meet with them. And once they're, I was going to say, once they're a little older, because I do work with like middle and high school, I like to talk to them and see, like, if we're planning out their homeschool program, then I want to see, well, what are your interests? What is it that you want to learn? How do you learn best? What's hard for you? So.
Yeah. Do parents who come to you mostly understand and accept that their children are differently wired, orchid kids, whatever, have some needs, or do you have to do some coaching ever there also?
I think the majority of families that come to me, a lot of them have already had testing, or they've had a neuropsych or psychoeducational evaluation, and they've been a therapist. I would say a lot of them that come to me are in that position, but sometimes I do work with families who they think something's going on that's different, and I will recommend they get tested. So I would say for me, I think people come to me mostly know something's up, whether they've had formal testing or not. I think, sometimes I will have like an intake call with parents, and they might not want to work with me if they don't really accept their child's differences.
Right. That's interesting. Okay. Yeah. Because it seems like, right, if people are coming to you to work with you, then they've mostly sort of moved through that, the process that comes before that, which is sort of recognizing that there's an issue that is internal to their child that's not being caused by something external, and then sort of moving into action. It's a challenge. Oh my gosh. I mean, the parents, I have so much respect and admiration for the parents who do push through, who do make that phone call to be like, I don't know how to do this, and clearly my child needs something else other than what we're getting, and we need to think differently about this.
Right.
It's such a great, it's such an amazing thing for a child to have a parent like that.
That is true. You're right. It's really hard. I mean, I have some diverse learners in my family, and it is hard. It's hard to come to that understanding and acceptance of who your child is. And I do think I think those the assessments are super important to really just tease out what's going on. If my child might have behavioral challenges, that could come from a myriad of different things. It could be anxiety, it could be some auditory processing disorder, it could be impulsiveness, like from ADHD, or it could be autism spectrum disorder. I mean, it could be so many things. So I think those reports are just so helpful, and I always read them very thoroughly when I'm working with families to figure out next steps for the education. I will say for education is like why it's so important, just because that's what kids do all day, and if they're
it's their job, right?
Their job, right? If you had were forced to be in your job, and you hated it and it wasn't working for you, and you had a horrible boss, that's not going to be you might start acting out too. You might start hitting people if you're little, right?
I love that. Yes, right. We ask kids to go at least 6 hours a day. Sometimes they're in aftercare, so they're going longer. And right, if that environment feels hostile or toxic, and you have a boss you don't like, hell's yes, you're going to act out. Of course you are.
Right.
And then let's, add some challenges on top of that where you have trouble withholding those impulses because you're a kid, or you have executive dysfunction, or, whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that, I think that what I do is really important because again, like I think that, and then what parent is happy if their kids aren't happy? So got a lot of stressed parents, and, as I said, I've sort of been in that place and myself. So I really take a compassionate approach. I really am empathetic to all my families. And like you said, I like what you said about how it's really hard to, accept your child and reaching out for help and in whatever way that it is to get their child the help they need. So yeah.
I love that. Stephanie, if people want to work with you, where do they find you?
So probably the best way is just to check out my website. It's exceptionaleducationalsolutions.com. It's a mouthful, but that's the name of my company, is Exceptional Educational Solutions. So my website's a good place. I'm also on Facebook, and you can find that all through my website.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
This has been fun. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been great to talk to you, Gabrielle. Thank you so much.
Take care.
All right, take care.